Hi, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and Happy New Year, everyone! Welcome to 2021, and I hope we're going to have an awesome year filled with lots of fun yarn dyeing experiments. Today I have a simple and fun, leave no dye behind, dyeing with leftover dye, mega time lapse. Today we're going to dye 7 different colorways using up a lot of leftovers that I had in my collection, and some of them were about a year old. But we created 7 stunning colorways, and I cannot wait for you to see how I did this. Before we jump into the video, please make sure that you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and have your notifications turned on. You definitely want to start this year knowing when new ChemKnits content comes out, because I have a lot of beautiful colors in store. Now, let's go dye some yarn. Before starting out on our mega time lapse, I have a lot of jars that are nearly empty, including this mystery red, or maybe it's a mixture. It wasn't a 1% stock. This is something that clearly needs to be used up. And then we have some mystery powders that are probably from Hanukkah 2019, so almost a year ago. But the main reason why I'm real time is I wanted to point out the pitting and cracking on this aluminum foil. This has been stored with citric acid for a while, and this is probably the reason why you should not use aluminum pans and containers for dyeing. It's just not sturdy or strong enough. So I thought it was worth pointing that out. And now let's jump in to our time lapse. I took these leftover dye powders out of the bag and removed the foil, trying to not get any to drip in. I'm pretty sure they're mixed with citric acid. The yarn we're dyeing today is Knit Pick's Stroll Fingering Weight yarn, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. I added 300 grams of the yarn with no acid into a pan with about 8 cups of water and started speckling on the blue color. And then I realized it wasn't really speckling. This is why I'm not 100% sure it was citric acid in here. It might have been sugar, but I think it was citric acid because the color was striking. We just weren't really getting speckles. So maybe to get speckles to show up, you really want that vinegar in the pan. I didn't really wait to flip the yarn. I liked this tonal that we were getting from this citric acid and likely a turquoise type color mixture. I was actually surprised. I think I thought that this was going to be a mixture of blue and pink mixed in with the powder. And so I was surprised when it was just one color. But this is what happens when you have leftovers and you do not label them. I did add some more water, and eventually I added 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. But I added that vinegar after I had finished adding all the dye. And I think, yes, I am about to add some more dye. I will use up all of the blue that is in this little cup. Now, there were 3 colors of dye powder that were left over. And I think the next time I bring the cup onto screen, you might notice that I'm holding the colors stacked together a little bit. And, well, I guess not right now because I'm just pouring in the leftover color. But I didn't want any powder on the bottom of the cup to really sort of move onto here. And with that last little bit of powder, I did dissolve some water in the cup to really leave none of this blue color behind. And there I come in with that vinegar. So now in a new pan, we're going to do something very similar. But this time I started with 12 cups of water, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. So that way maybe we could get the all over speckles like I love to do with leftover. This time, maybe it's probably a Dharma acid dye, maybe deep magenta or something like that, but it's a very, very beautiful bright pink color. And again, we're using 300 grams of Stroll Fingering Weight yarn, but I have everything hot this time, and we are actually getting heavy speckles all over. I really enjoy this technique as a variation on a semi-solid yarn, to just have what is ultimately very subtle speckles, because you get the speckles, but you get a spread of color on the background. So there's not a lot of contrast, but you still have a lot going on in the yarn, and it's something that I think would be really, really fun to knit with or work with. If you would like to learn more about any of the tools, the zip ties, the equipment I'm using in this video, for example, I'm using a 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan here. If you would like to learn more about any of it, I do have affiliate links down in the video description to KnitPicks and Amazon, where you can find the items that I like to use. But yeah, I'm just speckling more and more. I really enjoy this and want to do this more. And I don't know, I would love just like a rainbow collection of these heavy speckled yarn. But it's also just a really great way to use up these leftovers. And I really don't recommend storing dye powder for a year. But I did cover things with tinfoil, which doesn't disintegrate on the span of weeks, the span of months. I guess it started to. And I also stored that inside a plastic bag, so that way it wasn't sealed with the tinfoil, but I was able to keep the colors fairly separate. I don't see really any blue coming in here, just like I didn't see any pink going in with the blue, even though those cups were stacked together. There is a third color, which I think was a little bit, I must have used that before. I think from this project I had and I'll try to link to that video, I think I had a layering color type video where, I don't know if I layered both the pink and the blue or if I had a mixture. I just remember this yarn that I created around a year ago, and I thought I was going to be creating something similar, and this ended up feeling very different. Am I dissolving the pink in some water now? Aha! At the end, I'm now seeing my notes. At the end, I dissolved the leftover powder in about 8 cups of water and poured it all over. I was happy with the coverage of the speckles, but wanted to bring more of that spread, and so that's what I did. So here's our leftover in here. And, checking in, that's the rest of the blue yarn, removing it, all the dye absorbed, and I'm wiping the edge of the pan to come in with color number 3. And so this is that miscellaneous crusty color, and I'm gonna go rinse out that cup again and again to just get all that color in here. And this time, I'm only gonna dye 100 grams of yarn. I also added the remnants of my bright yellow bottle. That's right, and this gave us sort of a minty green pastel color. And I dipped it in. You can see that it's absorbing that color pretty quickly, but I moved it around to get more coverage, and then I heated it up. And this was, again, the same pan from the blue color, and so things absorbed quickly. And now I guess I'm removing the pink, and again, to show all of the color has absorbed. This is our number 2 pan that I will reuse for our next colorway. Aha, this mystery red. I think that this was left over from when I did that graffiti inspired yarn. There was a colorway that I did with hearts the first time I did the hearts, and I think that that's what this red is left over from. So I have no idea what it was. But I have 3 more skeins of pre-soaked Stroll fingering weight yarn, and I'm adding it in. I think I only added some of the color at first, and then I took some more color from the pan, dissolved it in water, and I'm pouring it on. I wanted a tonal, it's a sort of a semi-solid tonal. There's not a huge amount of variation, but I slowly added some color, dissolved it in water, and then added more, moving things around to help that color be more even. I didn't need it to be a true solid. If I did, maybe I would want the water to be cooler and to start with no acid and have a greater volume of water to have more coverage on the yarn. But slowly, I did end up using up all of this red finally. I think the very first time I did a mega leave no dye behind time lapse, I was using up some of the color from these jars, and the red just didn't get used up. So here I am, I added some more acid, and next I've got 3 colors. Oh gosh, what were they? I think pecan brown. There was a pink that was, I think, the 95% deep magenta, 4% of blue, and then a purple. Maybe it was electric violet. That were some remnants in those bottles. And I just added more water to each of those bottles and then started doing curlicues. I didn't want to do lines, and I didn't really feel like doing hearts. So I added these spirals so I could layer what the purple is so pastel because it's so dilute. But this let me layer the colors on in a softer kind of way to still give a fairly speckled appearance, but yeah, just without having the lines. And I thought that this was a nice alternative to the hearts, even though I love doing the hearts. This allows me to go a little heavier with all the colors. I did wait, I think around 3 to 5 minutes in between flips, but these colors were striking pretty quickly. This is a remnant water bath, or dye bath. So it has the leftover vinegar from some of the previous projects. I'm no longer sure how much was in there, but each time I flipped, I sort of alternated the purple and pink and then added this brown all over. And you know, sometimes when I'm doing these leftover dye videos, I will throw everything together into one pot and do something semi-solid. Sometimes, depending on the hues and how I think they go together, I really enjoy layering them in different ways to create something that is fairly unique, because I don't know exactly how much of each color I was using, but still fun. And so there really are so many different ways that you can play around with leftover dye. You really aren't limited to combining everything in one pot and dip dyeing or kettle dyeing, even though that is really fun. And there's definitely some more of that will probably be happening in this video. There are definitely some clips that missed, because over the course of this afternoon, there were a few times when I thought I was filming and then it turned out, oh, no, I guess I wasn't filming quite yet, but I think that you can get the gist of how I created each of these colorways. And whenever I flip the yarn, I always will dye one side, then the opposite side, and then I flip out to expose the more inside. And then, I don't know, I flip it so many times to just check to make sure all of that color is absorbed. And our red, thank goodness, all of that red absorbed. I was so happy. I was very nervous about that color. I guess I was satisfied with the previous one, so I had some leftover of the pink, the purple, and brown, and I combined them together, rinsed out the bottles, combined that. And we're gonna dye another 300 grams. This is not gonna be the final color. I really wasn't sure how much there was, and this ended up being fairly pastel. So I have some true black and blue steel. And so I took those colors and diluted them as well, and then poured them over the top. There's a lot of water in here. I think I added a lot of water, which means that the yarn is sort of floating. So previously I was talking about how I flip the yarn a lot. That one I don't think I flipped at all. I just set it up and left it. And there's our speckled going off. Aha, and I have some leftover jacquard brown, and I'm just gonna use what was left in that bottle. This color may be one of the oldest colors that I had left over. Jacquard brown is a nice, very nice true brown. It's a yellowish brown. I think one of my favorites, I love pecan brown because it's so cool toned, but the jacquard brown is just a nice brown. And I think I was surprised that the colors didn't all absorb really quickly, so I added more vinegar, waited, and then came back. But this yarn here, this was a super fast setup, and we got really good color penetration on that previous example. Oh, we're now washing the yarn, but if you have more volume in your dye pot and you're adding a big volume of your dye, you can get the colors to penetrate further and you might not need to flip. I started washing all of the colors, and the pink didn't bleed. I did see some bleeding with the red, but with a few extra rinses, it resolved itself. I didn't need to add vinegar or do any heats or soaks. It just, we had that pale pink bleeding that all of a sudden it just stopped, and that was awesome and great, because I always get nervous with bleeding. But if bleeding does happen, add your yarn to some water with a lot of vinegar and maybe heat set it again. I think, did I see a hint of bleeding with the blue? I don't see it right now. Yes, I did. And it was a similar thing. I just had to rinse it a bit more. It's possible that there was a clump of dye in the red and blue that just needed to dissolve and be rinsed out, versus having a lot of undissolved dye that was located there. But otherwise, I think most of the yarn just washed okay, and I really didn't see a lot of bleeding. It's always great. I mean, I rarely see a lot of bleeding, but I can be nervous about it because it's not as fun. And I know that these washing stages aren't the most exciting thing to watch, but I think that it's helpful especially when I'm doing something more experimental, to see how well the colors are striking. Oof, I think that this sort of moody grayish one, oh, was that some bleeding? I don't know. I think this one is probably my favorite colorway from this batch, but I can't wait to look at it all when it is dry. So after washing with soap, I put the yarn through my spin dryer and hung it up to dry. Oh my goodness, we dyed so much yarn today. And a lot of these colorways are ultimately pretty different. Forgot during my voiceover, but I only did 200 grams of this colorway. That's probably why it was so easy to get good coverage with the shallow technique. I think the last time I did a mega time-lapse like this, I ended up with a few colorways that actually felt like they might work pretty well together. Maybe I'm misremembering, but some of them definitely went well with the colorways that I had created previously. Some of these go well with other things I have in my shop, but overall, they are all fairly different. Sure, we do have, well, I guess 4 tonals, 2 really subtle variegated, and then this more subtle heavy speckled, which it feels odd to call something both subtle and heavy speckles, but I think that reflects the pink pretty well. One thing that is really fun though is that of our 4 tonals, they were all created with slightly different techniques. This tonal was with dry powder, and I'll zoom in a moment, but we see very few speckles. This was more just a more standard, adding the yarn to the pot and moving it around for a tonal, and the same with our brown. So those two were pretty similar. But the red, I started with some yarn in the pan and then did my more controlled tonal with low immersion to add more color on using large volumes to get good coverage, but still maintain some tonal variation. In all of these cases, I let the leftover colors speak to me and sort of drive the direction that I went, but it's interesting that I just have a few different types of tonal examples going on here. My biggest surprise with the blue is just that I don't see speckles really in here at all. I guess, oh, maybe there's like one. I see one little speckle there towards the center. But I think that this shows that having some acid in the pan already, even if you mix your dye with citric acid, is so important. Because then when we moved on to the pink, we had acid in the pan and a similarly mixed color. And here we got super, super dense speckles. This, oh, it's like a tonal speckled colorway. It is just so fun. The green is a really pretty tonal. It is a very minty type green. And yeah, I think that this is the kind of colorway that it does so well with complex stitch patterns. Same goes for our more red, which does lean, it's like in between a red and a pink. Is a pred? Is that a color? I don't really know, but this jar has been in my stash for so long and it's unlabeled, so I'm really happy I got such a beautiful yarn out of it. The next colorway ended up being so sandy. You can see the hints of pink and purple and brown in here, and it's just a very, very subtle, almost pastel speckled colorway. Speaking of subtle, I love this one. The dyeing of this colorway ended up being pretty fast because we had it in the pan, I poured the color on, and then that was it. And you can see that right here with this navy, we got color penetration all the way through. It's not even, but it's there and it's present, and it's just a very, very beautiful, subtle, smoky, variegated yarn. Finally, we have our warm brown color. And this is not the end of me playing with brown. There's been a lot of requests for me to do some more brown colorways. And, well, I now have more space to make new stock solutions. So that is on deck. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I hope you enjoyed this very colorful start to 2021. We are going to be playing with so many colors this year, and right now, I don't know what directions my dyeing adventures will take. So make sure that you are subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. Smash that bell icon so you don't miss any of the journey. This year we will do more color mixing, hopefully more natural dyes, more fiber reactive dyes, and so much more. So if there's something you really want to see in Dye Pot Weekly, please let me know down in the comments below. If you're a huge fan of ChemKnits and want to support us on another level, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. It's a fun way to get early access to the Dye Pot PS series, plus you can get some fun behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, advanced notice of shop restocks, and more perks, depending on the reward level that you pick. You can find a link to the Patreon down in the video description, and some other ways and places where you can help support the content here. But of course, the biggest way that you support the content is by watching the videos, giving them a thumbs up, and sharing them with your friends. Thank you so much for watching.